3, 2, 1, drop it. Are you ready for this?
Hello and welcome to our podcast in the first episode of Dad's Basement, where we talk about the significant world events that happened worldwide. Today we will be talking about the abolition of slavery. As many of you know, slavery has been practically abolished around the world since the 1800s. But today we have two experts on the abolition of slavery with us here today. Our first expert, British politician, philanthropist, and leader of the movement to abolish the slave trade worldwide, William Wilberforce. And our second guest, Frederick Douglass, an American social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, and statesman.
What it do? It's your boy William here. Thank you so much for having me on here.
What's good is Frederick.
Thank you for being on here. So our first question for you is, how were you two a part of the abolitionist movement? You guys can take turns explaining, but I think I want to start with William here.
For sure. So for me, basically, how it started was I met a group of activists who were against the slave trade, and they persuaded me to join their cause for abolition. I soon then became a leading abolitionist in England and led the parliamentary campaign against the British slave trade for about 20 years until the passage, finally, of the Slave Trade Act of 1807. In later years, I also supported the campaign for the complete abolition of slavery. That campaign led to the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, in which finally slavery was abolished in most of the British Empire.
And what was the Slave Trade Act of 1807?
Basically what it was an act of the Parliament of the UK, and it sort of prohibited slave trade in the British Empire. Although it didn't quite fully abolish the practice of slavery, it did encourage British action to press other countries to abolish their own slave trades.
How did your work on abolition affect the rest of the world directly?
Well, my work did not directly affect the rest of the world, but I very much affected Britain. However, Britain, Prussia...
Keep going.
Right this moment, okay.
However, Britain pressured other nations to abolish slavery and the slave trade. They had obviously had one of the best navies in the world at this time, and they had their navies out patrolling like the oceans and making sure there was no illegal boats transferring slaves, continuing the slave trade. So yeah, that's basically how my work, not directly, more indirectly, affected the rest of the world.
Okay, so we've heard his story. Now what about yours, Frederick?
Okay, so it's a very long story, but I'll make sure to keep it short. I escaped.
Keep going.
I escaped my slave master.
You understand? You beat the shit out of him at one point, but you gotta keep going,
I
Frederick.
escaped my slave master in Maryland after 20 long years. After I escaped, I became a national leader of the abolition movement in Massachusetts and New York. I soon after became famous for my oratory and anti-slavery writings. Narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, my bondage and my freedom, and life and times of Frederick Douglass.
I have heard about those books. I've been wanting to read it, but I have something about your famous autobiography. Can you tell us more about it?
But yeah, I wrote 3 autobiographies about my experiences as a slave, and it was actually awarded as the bestseller, and it was very influential in promoting the cause of abolition, so it did play a big part.
William, what was the reason you wanted to join the abolition cause?
Well, as I stated earlier, there was a group of activists, including Thomas Clarkson, one of my good buddies, who helped persuade me. But mainly, it was my Christian beliefs that made me join. I converted to evangelic Christianity in about 1785, 1784, sometime around then, not quite sure. But yeah, once I converted, I started to see the wrongs of slavery, and that is a huge cause. of what made me to join this abolition movement.
And Frederick, I was really interested in your autobiography. Do you know where I can find those specific books?
Yes, so like they're very worldwide. You can find these almost anywhere. Amazon, Apple Books, Kindle. They're everywhere. So
Can I just say, Frederick, I'm a huge fan. I just wanted to put it out there, man.
thank you,
Love
thank
you
you,
both.
thank
Love
you,
you both.
thank you.
Well, guys, we appreciate having you both on the first episode of Dad's Basement.
No problem. It's my pleasure to be on here.
But before we end our podcast, a quick, not really, word from our sponsor. Are you sick and tired of sitting in the dark? Well, fear no longer. For the new and pink light bulb by Thomas Edison, you can spend your whole day in the light. Just check our store, Light Plus, and you too can buy the new light bulb. Make darkness a thing of the past.
Oh my gosh, Frederick, I've heard of Light Plus. I love that. Have you heard of it?
I love it too. I actually just pre-ordered one.
No way, me too.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
I can't wait.
Me neither. I cannot wait for it.
Thank you so much, Light Plus. And that will end our first episode of Dad's Basement. We appreciate y'all turning in and listening. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any more episodes. Peace.
See y'all boys later.